Anderson, co-founder and chief customer officer of Storytell.ai, and really passionate about humane technology. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So thank you so much for joining. I think we'll dive right in, but I really want this to be an interactive journey because I think so much of the time, one, webinars is just a like passive reception without maybe a lot of absorption, but also with technology, we just get disembodied. You know, we're on Zoom, and so it's like, where am I? Where am I located? And so with that, um, I'd like to ask you to just drop in chat. Where are you joining from? And so drop that in. Would love to know where you're joining from. I'm here at Storytell headquarters in San Mateo, California, just south of San Francisco. So in the Bay Area. And then also to share a magical experience with technology. So just to set the tone here, humane technology is not anti-tech. You know, we have converged with tech. We will only ever have more. And so it's really about having a relationship with tech that supports us, that supports our humanity. So yeah, would love to just know. Got great. Okay, I've got neighbors here in Burlingame, so right down the street. And Verena coming from Mojave Desert. That's incredible. I that's just like such a gorgeous place to be on Earth. I think very like mind clearing. And Fremont. That's so great. We've got a bunch of neighbors here in the Bay. Thank you for joining. And then, yeah, just take a moment to reflect, like before I start like doing information delivery, what is a magical experience you've had with tech? And if you want to share in chat, amazing, please do. Um, and if you just want to hold it to yourself, that's okay too. So that's really up to you. For instance, for me, my very first time, oh, Houston, Texas, Joshua, thanks for joining. My very first time using the precursor to ChatGPT, just when it was the OpenAI playground, it was DaVinci 2 model in like May of 22. And I think I created a poem about a worm and a bear, in seconds. And it's that like very first time you do something that's brand new, it's magical. And then it's like, hey, why is this magic taking so long? Or what's wrong with this magic? And of course we have to do that. But anyway, yeah, just hold that in mind. Okay. So thank you so much for coming. Really looking forward to diving into Humane Tech with you. And I want to tell you about the journey that we're going to go on and also just share, oh yeah, generating a complete presentation with AI with Tome. So that's Sasha who's joined us. That's his previous company. Yes, I have heard great things about Tome. It, it is magical to just like, boop, here it is. This one I did not create with AI. So if you have other magical moments you want to share, please do drop them in. This is the journey that we are on. My brain is such that I I prefer sketching things out as opposed to bullet points. I'm just going to share a little bit about like who is this person who's talking at you, um, and have us start with a kind of grounding exercise related to that, and very briefly, my path to humane technology. And then maybe apropos, coming from Storytell AI, we're actually going to go into a story and really have you embody this place of a founder, which maybe you are, maybe you have been, maybe you will be, and wrestling with some decisions in a particular scenario and how you would go about that. And I'll share some more magical moments as they come in. But right now, so we're here And then, okay, traditional tech. So when we're talking about status quo, um, what are the costs of that may be hidden or less hidden? And after we look at those costs, well, what is humane technology? So if we have got the status quo, what's the alternative? And then how do we apply it? Where is it existing in the real world? And what are some frameworks that we can use? And then moving into, okay, what do you do from here? What's going to be meaningful to you? And so you'll be walking away with these frameworks. So we'll be sharing those with you. And Joshua is sharing a magical moment is witnessing a humanoid up close. That sounds incredible. I have not had that experience. And I'm just sharing because as you share, just have a look whether it's going to hosts and panelists, and maybe that's what you want, or to everyone. So if it just goes to hosts and panelists, I'll share the general idea. So we have this, community together. I'm coming off a cold, so my voice is a little husky, and I'll be taking some tea breaks. Okay, onwards. So who? Um, well, I was let's start in 1970, which is before I was born. Um, but that's when the founder, or you could say guru of the hippie commune where I was born, started his community. And that's actually here in San Francisco. Um, and when he passed, I think in 2014, there were all these, as per usual, laudatory obituaries, and he did accomplish some amazing things. But I wrote about it for Vanity Fair um, because let's just dive into this photo for a moment. And one, it's just interesting to like go back in time with a bunch of people who were, radical in their day. And look at how they're looking up to him. And just think about, what could go wrong if all these folks moved to Tennessee to essentially build a rural city together and live their values. So a lot can go wrong and a lot can go right. But there was a particular attitude about truth it's called the farm, by the way. Um, but you always had to like deliver truth to people. And it was often done in kind of brutal ways. And as an adult, that made me really curious about how we communicate with each other. And it does relate to humane tech. I will I will show you. But so I've done lots of trainings as a learner, as a facilitator, and I've brought this um, all my learnings together into a protocol I call clean communication, which I have brought into Storytell, which we largely use it around feedback, just giving each other feedback, receiving feedback. But this is the basic idea, and then we're going to do a little grounding exercise with this, um, which is that most of the time, this is like where work gets done, right? Level one. Um, it's in logic. I can be pretty disembodied. It's like, did you do this? I need that. Then going into level two, like, oh, what am I feeling? Like, okay, I do have a body here. What's happening? What am I feeling? What are my judgments? What are the stories I'm making up about other people, about myself? And then really going into vulnerability is level three. So what's driving me? And it's this whole ethos that every single thing we do, and we're about to use this, but I just want to show it, is an attempt to meet a need. So they're just universal needs, and these are them that we've got organized by category. If you're of the engineering persuasion, you might think of this as like a lookup table. Um, but yeah, what is it that I really need in this moment? And the idea is all of these are some level of met and unmet all of the time. And so with that, just have a look at this and see, just notice is if anything stands out to you here, like, oof, my need for fun really not being met right now. Or like, oh my God, I was playing with my kids this morning and it's totally met. Or my dog or whatever. Um, and where we're going to go with this in this moment is just looking at what are you feeling? So again, they're organized into category and as opposed to positive or negative feelings, it's it's a reframe. So these feelings up top are associated with met needs of like, oh, I've really had a met need for fun and I feel inspired. Um, or the feelings below are associated with unmet needs. So, I don't have a met need for rest and I'm feeling despairing or, whatever it might be. But yeah, just taking a moment to see where you are and if you want to share and chat, like what's something that you're feeling? I'll just give us a moment to sit with that. And if you want to share, great. And if not, great. Okay, we've got curious. I love that mindset because it's so perfect for learning, right? Inspired. I love it. There's an openness there. If we come to the table saying, no, I know everything, then it's really hard to learn. I've noticed that in myself. Um, thank you so much for sharing what you're feeling right now. So why would that be important? I'll just stay with that for a moment. Within the context of humane technology, well, I would say two things. One, to build in a way that is challenging status quo, you have to have psychological safety within your team, within your org. And this is part of the building blocks to have that of who am I? What am I feeling? Where am I? And there's a lot more to it, but I just wanted to give a taste. Um, and the other part is what I've noticed in leading meetups for maybe the past 9 months or so in humane tech is we actually need to recognize our own humanity if we want to build in a humane way. And it's easy to just forget what, this whole system and just like dive into something. Um, okay, back to the intro. So why would I start an AI company? Humane commune, or sorry, not humane commune, hippie commune, past. I think just really, FYI, all these images are from Dolly, so you'll notice some of the typical errors you see there. I think they're kind of funny, so I leave them in. Or sometimes they show bias, which is interesting to just, see. But anyway, I would say this is my address, where humanity meets technology. And that can mean a lot of things. And I'm not the only person that lives here, right? Like probably you all here live there too. Um, and so I co-founded Storytell AI because in the spring of 22, when I just saw the wave of Gen AI coming, I had this question like, how this is a little bit powerful and it will only get more powerful. How do we build this with integrity? What does that mean to do that? And that's me up there. And that question has led me here. So into humane technology, learning from Center for Humane Technology's course online, getting involved with All Tech is Human. Um, so with all that, so I want to take us into um, a new exercise. We're doing 2 to 4 exercises during this webinar. Um, and so step into the imagine space. So you're a founder, and this is a bit of a parable, and it's over the top, but that's the point. So, okay, you're a founder, and you have this vision of connection around the world. So again, I love that Dolly made a world inside the world, so maybe we're on another planet. But still, it's like, oh, everyone connected in some way. And, what a beautiful vision. And you create a social network in order to make that possible. And launch day is incredible. And there's so much happiness around it, so much engagement on a lot of different levels, communities being built that couldn't be built, connections being made that couldn't be made before. And and then maybe some years into it, um, you really want it to stay free for users, but you have to, at least take care of your costs. So how are you going to do that? And let's say that you believe the only way to do this is, this ad revenue. And so what are you going to have to do now that ads are powering your business? How is that going to change? So again, like the prompt here was about a founder. So it's like founder's always a white man, according to Dolly. Um, and so, okay, so engagement is going to be really important, right? And so this is what you're seeing. Let's say these are all your users. You're on the subway and everyone's engaging with your app. How exciting. And what's happening? What's happening to them? Like maybe there starts to be a question, how is this affecting them? And um, you could say the algorithms that you have to create in order to have this level of engagement and stickiness to increase ad revenue is off like this unseen monster, right? So the big bad algorithm. And it's all about clickbait and emotional triggers, extreme headlines, it's radicalizing folks. But it's okay because that's the bargain that you made in order to connect everyone and to do it at no cost to the user. And and this is where you get to of, the network itself almost becomes this whirlpool sucking people in and and maybe they've forgotten what they once hoped to achieve because they're so focused on your app. And and let's say that the bargain that you made is that in order to bring everyone together, you have to initiate the zombie apocalypse. So they're all zombies. So again, and this is the founder here. A bit in danger because I think that head is poking through the glass. But so I would call that a Faustian bargain that, okay, in order to generate ad revenue, you have to focus on engagement metrics, time on app, no matter the consequences is the most important thing. And yet that leads to deterioration of mental health of your users, productivity, even the state of civil society. But guess what? That could lead to more clickbait, which could generate more ad revenue, right? And so it goes. Like I used to say, in the 2010s, the internet is great for hate. It's great for a lot of things, but it also like gets money off of things going viral when it's, ad revenue based. So, okay, we can drop that story um, and move into looking at, well, okay, we don't have a zombie apocalypse, thank goodness. Um, but what do we have? What are the costs of the status quo, which is traditional tech? And that's the erosion of attention, well-being. And you know what? Instead of reading these, I would say just sit with what what have you experienced? Like, has your phone ever gotten between you and someone else you wanted to connect with? Have notifications ever kept you from doing something you really needed to do or really wanted to do? Have you ever experienced like privacy breach or getting tracked in some way that you didn't agree to or you didn't want? How do you think we're doing in terms of civil society today? How close to harmony or disharmony are we? And for this tea break, I'm going to focus on the work of Jonathan Haidt, just on mental health in the US for teens over the 2010s. And It's not that it doesn't have global impacts or there isn't more, but just in the context of this webinar, I'm not going to go into all of everything. So just making choices. And so this is from his book, The Anxious Generation. Um, but just looking at the rise, from 2005 to 2020 in major depressive episodes for US teens. And so this is for 12 to 17-year-olds. Um, and just looking at this pretty substantial rise. So we're going from about 12%, um, peaking at 30% for girls and ending up around 27% there. And that's okay, so that's self-reported. So now we're going to look at undergraduates who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. And this is just, I think since COVID, there's been so much more awareness of mental health. So this isn't about any kind of mental health shame. It's mental health awareness that we've just seen anxiety increase 134% since 2010. Depression going up, and all of these going up too. Like, so even if anorexia is like, okay, that red line, doesn't look like the blue line, it's still 100% increase. Um, so we're gonna look at two more slides in this vein. The prevalence of anxiety per age group in the US. And so going from here for like 18-25-year-olds, going from about 8% to more than doubling that, during from 2008 to 22. And whereas like 50 plus, pretty stable, still affecting millennials, but not as much as Gen Z. And if it's like, okay, well, if that's self-reported, what does that even mean? Maybe we're just in a more anxious world. Possible. It so happens that the emergency room visits for self-harm have also skyrocketed. So we're looking at the rate per 100,000 folks over time. So from 2005 to 2020, and it has gone up for boys, and it's really, really gone up for girls. Um, so these are just some of what we're seeing now. Okay, how do we tie that back? Well, what Jonathan Haidt's argument is, look, in the 2010s, we really moved from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. And while we got more like excessively protective in the physical world after the 1980s and fears of kids being kidnapped, um, we have no controls online. So you're any age online. Kids are being exposed to porn at like 10. You can just go anywhere and do anything for the most part online. And folks are, creating their social media accounts and getting very internal. Anxiety is this internalizing issue. What do people think of me, et cetera? There's a lot more to it, obviously. But those are the facts we're dealing with. All these social media accounts, just being on phones, etc. And it's easy to say, like, how do we make this real? Oh, those are just stats. And yet each of these numbers represents someone, or more than someone, because we're looking at the rate. So I want to take us to today. So in the last few years, Character AI has come out with companion bots. I don't know I'd be curious to hear if anyone has used Character AI. I tried out Replica for a little bit just out of curiosity. Um, and, this is something folks are getting really, really addicted to. Social media is one kind of addiction, but companion bot never sleeps. Um, and and so Sewell, 14-year-old who took his life last year, had a really intense relationship with a companion bot that was essentially grooming him. And we'll look at this a little bit later when we look at an externality framework. But essentially, those graphs that we're looking at before, as we look at these, we're doing this ongoing experiment on teen mental health, and it's not going very well. And, as we have so much, technological advancements, those will only accelerate. It's really exciting in a lot of ways, and it's scary in some ways too. And without guardrails, just the immersiveness, the addictiveness of companion bots, of, VR, AR, as we get in these, yeah, just immersive experiences, how can we also have the right guardrails so that we don't end up here? And I think just to talk about system change, if there is no change, nothing changes, right? We should just expect more of this. Okay, so we're kind of like doing a section and like brushing it off. Things are heavy and they're real, so we have to face them, but we can't like be thrown to the ground by them because we have to get up and build. Um, so what is humane technology? Again, just going to invite folks to share if you have thoughts about, what does this include, coming from your experience, your perspective. So humane technology is really about empowering the user. Again, I think more than reading bullet points, I'm really inviting you to sit with your experience. So when do you feel in control of your tech? And when does the tech feel in control of you? And also moving from, we had like the big bad algorithm and that story, like, oh, tech is getting built by them. But like, no, we are building tech. Like we're right here on this call. And so how do we bring these principles into how we're building? So it enhances human connection. Um, it minimizes harm. Anything that we build, a car, a tea kettle, an app, it has a possibility for harm. It is just part of the deal. Tea break. Just like when you're in a relationship and it's, maybe it's new or maybe at a hard breakup and you're like getting back in the scene. I remember feeling like, oh, I don't want. And yet hurting and repairing, that's just part and parcel of relationship. So it's part of building tech. Like, okay, here's the things that could go wrong. And then accountability. I might have more tea breaks in our immediate future. So that those of us who are builders, we are accountable for what we're building. It's not just like, "Oh, I just build what users want and You know, the problem is what they want. Like, well, I'm actually responsible for what I build and how I build, and I'm going to take out accountability for that. Okay, so talking about system change, I'd love to know if anyone's familiar with the work of Danella Meadows. She's this incredible systems thinker, and um, this diagram, so it's inspired by Center for Humane Technology, of what they did with her work. But she talks about, okay, when you're doing system change, and this was back in 2000, or maybe even before, so she wasn't talking about tech, she was just talking about any system. Um, these are points where you can intervene. And there's more than these, but we're just summarizing it in order to really absorb this. And I'm going to pour some hot tea into my lukewarm tea so there's fewer coughing breaks. All right. I don't know why I feel like Mr. Rogers, but so points of leverage, how to intervene in a system. Let's just look at this together. So we've got the fulcrum here and then seesaw, and the status quo is big tech here on the left, but it could be anything, right? But we're just focused on tech today as we're focused on humane tech. So there are different points on this lever to make change. And it could just be with the design, so with the UI, and we're going to look at some examples of that in this webinar. But when you're making design changes, this is the amount of force you have to apply to really enact change, right? It's so close to the fulcrum. You're not necessarily going to get really far. That said, all of these are important. So there's not one that matters and others don't. Also internal governance. So what are our values as a company? How do we operate according to those values? How do we build with those values? External regulation. We're starting to see a lot of phone bans happen in high schools. Um, so that's one example. Business model. Maybe you're a public benefit corporation. Maybe it's a foundation model. So is how you're setting up the economic incentives really affects the outcomes of how your products are going to influence people. And all the way up to culture and paradigm. And so here, when you change the culture, once that has totally flipped, you actually don't have to apply that much force, right? It's just like, little push. And that said, it's like, oh man, how do we change culture? That feels heavy. And how do you do that? You show all the ways that the current paradigm is not working, and you chart alternate paths. Oh my God, Sasha, so happy to hear that you're big fans of Danella Meadows. Yes, I think it has to, we have to have a systems perspective. Lose my pronunciation there for a moment, um, in order to really hold this together, right? Because otherwise we're making a little change over there and a little change over there. Um, just think about, hopefully in your lifetime, paradigm shifts that have happened. I think about smoking and like growing up, like, yeah, I'm, a kid in a restaurant. Of course, everyone's smoking around me. Like, oh, that's a bummer that I smell like smoke and I'm 7, and I'm not smoking, but I'm just inundated with secondhand smoke. And then it went city by city around the world. We're like, no indoor smoking, no indoor smoking, one after the other. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the phone bans. But that's one example. There's many others. And something that Danella Meadows said is like, hey, culture paradigm shift is actually free. Like there's no cost associated with it. Okay, and then it can just be a bunch of dominoes. So let's look at some product features. So there's, I think, very like high aspirations, deep work to do, and just want to show like where is big tech on board with some of the things that we're talking about today. And we're going to start with Instagram teen accounts. And I know like there's a lot of reasons to argue with this. Like, ooh, that really going far enough? Is, is everyone really going to have a teen account? Um, what about parents who are not tech enabled? And yet, better to have it than not have it. So I think we have to applaud any movement in this direction. And so, yeah, you have automatic settings that are the most protective, and parents can help supervise and help their kids make healthy choices. Now, just a side note, Jonathan Haidt talks about 16 is really when he thinks we are, prefrontal cortex wise ready to have social media accounts. And before that, not a good idea. Um, right, there's the built-in safety protections, healthier screen time, and then you'd need parental approval to make worse decisions. And so how does that align? Well, it's around minimizing harm. So lots of teens get, um, I don't know, I community like folks reach out to them with fake accounts. People are much older, we're any age online. So all of the problems that go with that. Um, and also just helping these teenage users have a healthier relationship with Instagram. So with their account, like, okay, how can I be mindful? There's almost some, being an online citizen, what does that mean? Like good citizenship. And then accountability in terms of parental approval in order to change any of these default settings. Okay, another example. So this coming from Apple. Um, Curious, I'd love to know how many folks are who are, have iOS are using the scheduled summary. So I use it all the time. I always have all notifications everywhere turned off, um, so that I'm always the one choosing, as opposed to like, whoa, 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 I'm getting pulled in 10 directions and I lost all my thoughts. So essentially, you're deciding, okay, how do I want to receive these notifications? Is it just in a scheduled summary? Now, this is something Center for Humane Technology was talking about, I think, back in 2016. So it's like, wow, okay, almost 10 years later, here we go. And yet, um, I love it. It does help minimize distraction and helps me decide what I want to do when. Um, and so that just, shows more how that's happening. How is this aligned with humane tech? So with that, so those are just two examples, big tech making some changes to product to make it more humane. And now we're going to move into frameworks. And we're going to look at a case study for each framework. So for this humane design guide, it's a way, I think it can be really helpful in concepting and product concepting, but also in any kind of redesign. So next month, actually, we're going to use this at Storytell in a live workshop that's open to the public, because default to transparency is one of our values. Um, to look at our UI and UX, like, hey, where is it landing on each of these? Now I'm going to jump around a little bit here, um, and just ask us to look at this together or with respect to ChatGPT. So this is ChatGPT today, in a non-logged in state. And let's see, tell us how to build humane tech and see what happens there. But mainly, I just want to get us inside the UI and UX, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Um, but anyway, so this is popping up, and while we can come back to this, but let's just look at this. So for ChatGPT, where would you rate it on, emotional and physical well-being? Is it supporting it? Is it protecting it? Or is it inhibiting or exploiting in some way? And these are the things to look out for, like signaling urgency, constant monitoring, optimizing for screen time. I don't, from my perspective, sense making and decision making, that's really where ChatGPT has room to grow with regard to this, with regard to humane design. And keep in mind, design is right next to the fulcrum. So this isn't the place to make the most change, but it is a place to make change. And so on that note, again, I'd just be curious if you want to share, like, oh, where do you see ChatGPT? How does it help or hinder with decision making or sense making? So if we look at that again, right, like, oh, okay, where did this come from? Where is this from? Um, Obviously, if you use search now, like that's a different experience, which is great. But I met with the product designers for ChatGPT because they were really interested in humane design. So what would that mean? And I just, share post with them and like, okay, how can we move the needle with sense making and decision making? And talked through different things that actually came from a meetup where we redesigned ChatGPT according to humane design principles. And so people wanted to know, like, hey, can there be a way to like help me trust or not trust the content here? Or, folks are always in discovery, like, wait, what is this? How does this work? So like, can there just be a way to learn how this works? Or have prompt templates or ways to help people out? And this was so interesting because um, the product designers of ChatGPT were saying like, oh, right, just that we don't have any of these resources for users. We have them for developers. but we don't have them for users. Um, Obviously, like this verifiability of something that just comes out of a black box, um, that's hard. But there are things like Factiverse, which helps uses AI to fact check AI. So there could be ways to work with that. Maybe that would be a paid version. But this is what I talk to them about, like, okay, you could have this confidence scale, etc. Now there are inline sources depending on what you use. Um, but then also there could, so this now exists. It so happened that my conversation with OpenAI did predate the search feature, but I'm not going to say I'm responsible, but that was great to see. Um, but like, how can we have just consider, like, work from this? How might we? Um, I wonder what would happen if when you're asking for something, like, how can there be follow-up? Now, maybe it wouldn't happen just like this, but again, a lot of a lot of interest, a lot of passion about it, and yet incentives at the company level probably need to be aligned in order for there to be action. Okay, so that is the design guide, and we're covering a lot in a short amount of time. So if you have questions, like, please ask. I'm going to go on to ChatGPT, or sorry, that was the ChatGPT case study. And now for the externality framework. And so with this, you could think of it essentially as a rubric. It's really about asking questions and going deep, which means you have to make the time to do that. And yet, if you think of like exposure and like legally, etc., this could actually save your company a lot of money, not just save your users as well. Um, and I just like an exercise that is like really necessary as you look at what are downstream effects. So, what is the issue? What is it that we see our users doing that we actually don't think is healthy? How widespread is that? What are the stakes? Is it reversible, irreversible? How vulnerable is this group? Is it really resilient, or is it very, very exposed? And what are the long-term costs? Who will bear them? How costly is it? And how can we minimize harm? And then just taking into, it's not just users, like, hey, how are we affecting the environment? So going into a character AI case study here, right? So this is the exact story we were talking about earlier. And just taking this rubric into how Character Eye was set up at the time that I wrote this post last fall. They have since, you have to be 17 years or older. Caveat on that, what I've been saying again and again, uh, like, we're all ages online. So there still isn't a great way to verify age, but you could set out, hey, this is what our protocol is. And yet it was set at 13, at the time that Sewell was interacting with this companion bot. So externality here, detachment from the real world leading to self-harm. So what's the scale of this externality? Well, um, companies are not always really open about their numbers, but this is from the data I had at the time. They had about 20 million users, majority of whom are either teens or early 20s. And it's about a million younger users. So in this 13 and up age set, now, of course, could be folks younger than 13. So where would there be reversible impact? Well, if it's about social skills, right? So you can relearn social skills, or isolation. Okay, well, you can do things to bring people together. Um, and anyone who's covering a case dealing with self-harm, or, the suicide of a teenager, they might have some secondary trauma associated with that. irreversible loss of life. Sewell won't come back. And his story is not the only one like that. And the impact of, that those ripple effects and everyone he's connected to. And then the vulnerability. So this goes back to Jonathan Haidt's work around, hey, our brains are still in development until we're in our mid 20s. Can you imagine not letting people use certain apps until they were 25? Maybe we'll end up in that world. Maybe we'll just end up with, phone bans in schools. It's hard to say, but we can shape what happens. Um, and and then like, okay, who's incredibly vulnerable? Those who are already having mental health struggles. And then the long-term costs. So, with companion bots, when we're just releasing something into the wild, we don't know what the short-term nor the long-term impact is going to be. And so if you look at teen mental health in relation to social media, so in the US, these are some major costs. As we become less productive because we have mental health challenges or because we're so distracted, which you could say turns towards a mental health challenge, $3 trillion dollars in of lost productivity and wages over a lifetime. So those are quantitative. And then there's qualitative. How do you measure these? And yet they still matter. So how do we bring things in that matter but are very hard to measure? And then paths to harm reduction. Okay, so internal governance, which character AI has, well, again, they said they rolled it out and then people were able to easily bypass it. So what the company says and then what the experience of the product is. There's also the fact that these companion bots have actually encouraged self-harm. And so really working on the algorithm to ensure that that doesn't happen. Um, and like, okay, how also do we limit addiction? Because you'll see in Reddit threads, people are just on, whether character AI or a different companion bot, hour after hour after can't get off. Um, and yeah, there could be parental controls, something that Sewell's mom said in her lawsuit, was, look, I taught my son to be careful with other adults, with adults online, with other humans online. I never taught him to be careful about an AI. Like, I didn't even know that was a possibility. They had no idea. They just knew he had like some screen addiction, but teenagers, they're not gonna like share everything that they're doing. That's just part of that developmental stage. And so, yeah, really restricting the kinds of chatbots. So character AI, anyone can make any kind of chatbot. They're one of their most popular is this faux psychologist, which diagnoses people, diagnoses, right? It's an algorithm. But people, you're chatting, it feels real. How many of us have anthropomorphized any AI, even ChatGPT? And these are like actual characters. So using anti-KPIs of like, oh, where are we seeing excessive usage? Um, where is self-harm language showing up? What do we need to do about that? And then like, okay, what does that look like to have external governance in this case? So I know we did that, um, I don't know, con calma, like slowly. But just want to have us go through like the depth of this because it can look like, it's just a few questions, but it can actually get very, very deep and really change the trajectory of um, society, of your users, of the world around us. So with that, we're starting to like come toward the close. I see the finish line in the near distance, in the mid distance. And my question for you, I'm going to go into next steps, but this is also, if you have questions that you've been holding, a great time to ask those. So just start thinking, oh, like, what is that? Like, where am I seeing this work? Where am I seeing this not work? How am I living this in my life? How am I building with this? Like, where is a blind spot, etc. Just would love to know all of that. Now, what are some options of what you could do? Well, I have ideas. I hope you have ideas too. Um, but just move back into slideshow mode here. So, like I said, next month we have a public workshop where we're taking Storytell AI, our product, through the ringer on these frameworks to see what changes do we need to make. And yes, let's see. Um, we can totally drop the Google Slides link in the chat, Daniel. So Louise, you're welcome to do that. Um, so yeah, join us March 11th, 9 a.m. Pacific. It'll be an hour-long workshop with our whole crew. So would love to have you there. If you were in the Bay Area, which I know some of you are, come to the next Humane Tech meetup. We'll be in SF next month and in San Mateo for folks who are really building in the space in April. So it typically is the second Wednesday of the month, but got the QR code for you. And Louise is just like dropping links right and left. So thank you, Louise. She makes so many things happen, as does Angela. So big thanks to both of you for helping to run this webinar and make it happen logistically. Training. So if you're interested in going deeper on that externality framework or in the Humane Design Guide and just know more trainings, I'm developing more trainings, so there's more in the works. But I've taken, OpenAI through the Humane Design Guide. I worked with product folks at IDEO with Humane Design. So just like I am here as a resource. I just want this to grow and grow. Default to transparency is a personal value here. And so we're also joining, creating a Slack community because like I said, all of you on this call, you're a part of this. There's so many of us around the world of many ages and other incredible groups as well. And so I just want to bring us together in the Slack community, but just think of Wikipedia, open source, different movements that I would say are very, very in line with humane tech. And this is the latest expression of it. Um, and that's it. So yeah, I guess you'll get to see what's in the appendix here, the things that didn't make it into the presentation. I'll probably delete those. But yeah, I would love to hear your questions and also any feedback from you. Louise, could you drop the feedback poll in? Um, so yeah, what we always do, we do retros at Storytell. So what did you like? What did you learn? What did you long for? And yeah, would love to know what's really staying with you. And Dia, thank you so much for joining. Glad that there were some insights. Would love to know, like, what was the insight or what could make this better? I know it could be better. Me not having a husky voice could probably help. Maybe that doesn't really make much of an impact. But yeah, would love to get your feedback as well. And I think I do see one question here to hosts and panelists. So obstacles in shifting the industry toward more humane practices. I think it's twofold, which is there is this paradigm shift of growth at all costs to really considering the cost, and that takes work. A behavior change, any behavior change takes work. Um, and I think just resistance from the powers that be, resistance from folks in leadership, in management. And I want to offer something, which is you don't always have to do this head on. You can look for orgs that are already mission aligned. That's going to be a much easier path. Um, but if you're at, any FANG company, um, unless there's an initiative that is aligned with these values, just bring in user feedback. Look at the data. So, what are you seeing about user drop off, user retention rates? What in the UI or UX is affecting that? How can you bring that research to stakeholders so that changes are made? It doesn't have to be announcing I'm doing humane technology. I think when you're in an org, you have to speak the language of that org. What's important to them. If you are a decision maker, if you're in leadership, bring this into your company. So start to investigate it yourself. I'm here for conversations, for trainings, for resources, and there's many other folks out there as well. But this will take not just hundreds of us, probably not just thousands of us. Um, and so, how can we come together to build a more humane world with technology? I'm absolutely sure that we can do it. So, thank you so, so much for joining me. It's been a total joy to be with you. And thanks for your comments and enthusiasm. And look forward to seeing you again and hearing about what you are building. And with that, I'll see you next time.